So, welcome to EJIL Live. I have with me this evening Professor André Nollkaemper, who among many other distinctions is also the current president of the European Society of International Law, which very recently celebrated its 10th anniversary. And maybe my first question would be a balance sheet of the first 10 years.
Yes. But 10 years is a very short time, comparatively speaking, because we've come from quite far. So we've now, for the first time, a forum for European discussions on questions of international law from a European perspective. We didn't have that 10 years ago. For the first time, we have a forum where younger scholars engage with more senior European scholars, practitioners. We have the beginning of a very professional organization. So I think we have come quite far. At the same time, there are things to be accomplished. I think the diversity within Europe still needs to be strengthened. We are strong in the traditional international law countries in Western Europe. We might need to expand in the southern and eastern areas in Europe. In particular, I think the connection, the involvement of practitioners in ESIL needs to be strengthened.
So first of all, anybody watching this, take this as an opportunity to go online and join ESIL. You also get a subscription to the European Journal of International Law as part of that package. It's a very good deal, and especially if you're from Southern or Eastern Europe, the non-traditional countries.
Exactly.
But if you look, say, for the next 10 years, apart from increasing your membership and increasing diversity, what are going to be your priorities? Where would you want to be 10 years from now?
A major priority would be to make ESIL more relevant in the debates on concrete international legal conflicts and issues as they now play out in Europe, like the Ukraine, but also the European discussion on the Middle East. ESIL should not be a political organization taking political positions, but we should provide a forum for exchange of views between scholars and practitioners from different areas in Europe, and thereby make a contribution to a mutual understanding on disputed, controversial international legal issues.
So, two follow-up questions to that. You said for the first time there's a forum to discuss problems from a European perspective. Now, it's true that 10 years ago, the forum for Europeans to discuss international law was Washington at the annual meeting of the American Society of International Law. I think that's changed forever. Europeans, of course, still go to the American Society of International Law, but ESIL is increasingly successful, the number of people coming to ESIL conferences grows, etc. So there's no question about that. But what does it mean from a European perspective? What is the European perspective? You know, this is something we struggle also in EJIL.
Yes.
We are the European Journal of International Law. We believe that EJIL has an identity, but it's hard for us to articulate what's exactly a European perspective, because we are meant to be non-political.
Yes. That's very true. There are splits in all directions. Actually, there's a paradox that Europe is often seen as the legalistic region in the world with its belief in international law. At the same time, much of the activity in ESIL is actually quite far removed from the legalistic perspective on international law. Critical legal studies has had a decisive influence on the development of the European society. So there's a multitude of opinions and strands within ESIL. So I don't think we should claim that there's the European identity or perspective on international law, but there's a variety of positions which in themselves are coherent, which through interaction and exchange actually make Europe a recognizable entity in international law, which is definitely different from the US, Asia, Africa, Latin America.
That I'm sure. That I'm really sure. But what interests me is the scholarly world. Because you say critical legal studies had a major influence on the development of, that's an American import. So the question is there a European scholarly perspective which is distinct in the way that in international law and international politics, Europe really stands for certain things which are, in many issues, different from the United States, for example. But is there a European scholarly perspective? I don't know the answer to that question.
Yes, no, I would not take a position that there's one European scholarly perspective. There are huge differences between the German and the French and Italian and the British and Scandinavian perspectives. I think it would be too easy to put them all together in one. At the same time, much of the scholarship is driven and based on a belief, profound belief, in the importance of international rule of law, the faithfulness to the idea of international rule of law, and the critical perspective and distance, but still based and aimed to developing and improving that perspective on international rule of law.
It is important, I think, would you agree with me, that the message should be that everybody around the world should feel they should join ESIL.
Very much so, very much so.
I mean, I think part of the strength of the American society is that such a large segment of their membership are non-Americans.
Yes, and that's
so you would like Australians and Chileans and Chinese, etc., to be members of the European Society of International Law.
Yes, that's happening already. We have membership from in over 60 countries, many of them in different regions of the world. And I guess 10 years ago, when we started, it had somewhat of an inward-looking perspective to disconnect ourselves from the focus on the United States. But by now, we are branching out, re-establishing connections with different international societies in Asia, Africa, Latin America. So we are very open, and we would welcome membership from all over the world.
In EJIL, every now and again, the language issue is raised. How can it be the European Journal of International Law, and it's an English language journal? And, you know, I've written more than once in an editorial and explained the rationale and our history, that we started off as bilingual and just it didn't work, and that even recently I decided that I invited a French scholar who submitted an article and said, would you be interested in this? It was in French, and I said, you know what, I would be interested in French. Let's just publish it in French. And the French author said to me, no, I want to publish it in English because I want it read.
Right.
Is there an issue in ESIL on the language issue?
Well, it's definitely bilingual, to set up bilingual, and we'll stick to that. At the same time, I do share with you the interest of the French speakers to speak at the annual events in French is definitely declining. Most of them prefer to speak English because they would reach a larger audience, which I think is wise. And there's also the issue of why only French and English, not Spanish or Italian, where there's an enormously rich international scholarship in German. So we still stick to it, and French is a major language in Europe. And actually, that element remains. At the same time, what is important is that everyone in society can communicate with each other and can enter the discussion. So that level, English will have to be the language.
I tell you what worries me about the language issue. So, it's English de facto has become the scientific language. And as a first language, it's not such it's a small language. But as a second language, it's way ahead of any other language as a second language. But what worries me from where I sit as the editor of EJIL is that I see in the scholarship that if it's not published in English, it gets less read, less cited, less present. Yes. And I think there we really face a problem and a loss. That when English also eclipses the scholarship, that people don't feel the need to read in other languages, to educate themselves in other languages, we really have a net loss. And it's a different landscape to 25 years ago.
Yes, I do agree, but then it's definitely more than French, and it definitely will apply to German and Spanish and Italian.
But you know, when I read articles submitted by German authors, in EJIL still a majority of the articles submitted and published by EJIL or by people whose English is not their native mother tongue and are not writing from an English-speaking country. But for the most part, of course, there are exceptions. The German will cite the German literature and the English language literature. The Italians will cite the Italian literature and the English language literature. You see much fewer articles where you can see a broad reading of the literature in different, and that really has changed. That really has changed, and probably in an impoverishing way. Probably in an impoverishing way. I don't know what the solution to that is.
No, I don't think we can solve this as this end, because it's heavily connected to the fundamental process of education throughout Europe. But I do agree it's a lost richness in communication with other languages. And there might be a way in more diverse forms to engage in discussion with other languages. I do agree that more thought might be given to that. Actually, ESIL might be a good forum for pursuing that.
So, first of all, Mazel Tov on your 10th birthday.
Thank you very much.
It coincides with EJIL's 25th birthday. And let's decide that we will meet 10 years from now. And
that's very good, and we should not forget that there's this close connection from the very start between EJIL and ESIL.
And we will be writing in one of our editorials. People asked us, can you clarify the relationship? And we will have a very clear statement what is the relationship between ESIL and EJIL in one of the future editorials. And I also want to tell all of those who are watching this that in the next issue of EJIL 25/4, André Nollkaemper will be publishing as the guest a guest editorial in EJIL, also to mark the 10th anniversary of ESIL. Thank you very much, and the best wishes and good luck to ESIL.
Thank you very much.